Moving on to issue 4, behold the cancel culture. A malignant tactic is spreading across the nation. It involves social media mobs taking their digital pitchforks to intimidate fellow citizens. In recent weeks, we've seen the New York Times opinion editor resign over a Tom Cotton op-ed. The Washington Post shamed a private citizen for wearing blackface to a party, and Jimmy Kimmel forced to apologize for jokes. Oh, and the brands Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben's are no more. Clarence, question to you. Apart from canceling everything because of the coronavirus pandemic, has cancel culture gone too far?
Well, I think it's going too far when it hits the New York Times op-ed page, for example, which is really a hallmark in journalism for open speech and balance, et cetera. Ever since I got into this business, papers have tried to have op-ed pages to give the readers some a balance of views. And we have a situation now. People are going back to look at Halloween parties, for heaven's sake. I confess, I went to a Halloween party shortly after college in which I came dressed in whiteface. I'm wondering now if my career will be threatened by this. I think we're going a little too far to go back into everybody's record in this way. I think we saw with the governor of Virginia, for example, an old blackface scandal hasn't affected his popularity among black voters much at all. So it's like these things too often are just judged with sweeping judgments rather than looking specifically at who's really being offended here and why. Is there another way to work this out?
I'm wondering if Clarence just canceled himself. Anyways, moving on
Could
to
be,
Pat.
I don't know.
Well, I basically agree. I think we ought to be tolerant about things people have done in their younger age and college age and the rest of it. They weren't thinking, and I think what we're going on now, it's really an effort almost to stifle speech and it's like something out of 1984 that's going on. You say something that is offensive and you're not allowed to speak. The spirit of America that used to exist, and I think less and less does now, is really open and tolerant. And okay, if you make some mistake during a debate, you say sorry about that. But now you're going to finish off your career like James Bennett, who's a good guy. I mean, he's a liberal guy. He covered me and treated me fairly and honorably in the '96 campaign as much as anybody. I mean, he dealt with my trade issue better than any other reporter almost, even though I know he disagreed with it. To have a guy like that lose his position, I find profoundly offensive.
Eleanor, question to you.
I just want to point out, James Bennett was not fired. He resigned, and it came to light that he had not read the op-ed in question and that he had requested the op-ed and then not read it. So there was a kind of a dereliction of duty there. So I think he felt like he should take the fall. So, I mean, I think all these things are more complicated than they first appear. And the shaming of the private citizen at the Halloween party was held by the progressive columnist for the Washington Post, who initially lied about whether he even knew this woman. And so, it's always more complicated. And I think it's liberals who twist themselves into knots trying to understand the changes in the culture and keeping up with it. It strikes me the conservatives, for the most part, just double down, and they're not losing their jobs. and so I think it's what the white guilt is being borne by liberals, not conservatives.
We love to eat our own sometimes.
Well, Amber, question to you, and you saw this with Jimmy Kimmel this week, with NBC's 30 Rock, their episodes with blackface included, in which Tina Fey, the head writer and creator of the show, asked for those episodes to be pulled from streaming services. Then you have Scrubs, another comedy show about it's a medical comedy, including blackface as well. Those episodes have been pulled. But also you have this with Jimmy Kimmel, as I may have mentioned before. He appeared in blackface posing as Karl Malone and Oprah Winfrey, and there's tape that surfaced of him in 1996 saying the N-word. So Amber, where do you think this leads? Is it going to be that everybody is going to get canceled?
Yeah, well, the biggest problem with cancel culture, well, two big problems. The first is that people who participate in it don't account for the fact that things may have been acceptable at a certain time. They want to judge everything by today's standards, which simply isn't prudent. And the second thing is that it's a very cynical thing that people are doing. Most of the time when people are trying to cancel one another, it's not because they actually take issue with what that person said or did, but it's because that person is a political opponent to them. And they're just trying to shut that person up so that they don't have to listen to or have other people hear views that they oppose. Cancel culture really started in the political sphere, and now it's finally moving over to culture. But it's mainly because these are individuals, these celebrities, they're white people who are not particularly revered by the progressive left. And so they're using this as an excuse to get these people off the air and hopefully try to replace them with people that are more in line with their political leanings.
Clarence.
That's showbiz. No, I think that this has gone too far. I want to give amnesty to Al Franken, for example, and a number of other people who happen to be on the liberal side in many cases and wanted to do the right thing. And then it turned out all they did was just screw their own side because the right wing wasn't reciprocating. So I think we need to kind of get back to some measure of appreciating the value of an apology and the ability to move on.
Pat.
Well, I think my view is there's awful lot of apologizing going on, and I think some of it is unnecessary. And I think the idea that people are so offended today by words and things, again, I mean, this country is, the one phrase I used to hear more than any other when I was working a rope line was, Pat, this isn't the country we grew up in. And I think in many ways, there's some wonderful things that have happened in the last 50 years, but the intolerance, the people going after each other to shut them up, all of these things, I think you got a country that's fundamentally, as a society, fundamentally disintegrating, and some people are happy that it is, and they're using these weapons to cancel individuals whom they dislike and whom they hate.
No, this is Pat going back to Trump's inauguration speech, American Carnage, painting all of the protests as very threatening events that are going to overtake suburban America and talking about the disintegration of America. No, we have, especially the two youngest generations, the Generation Z and the millennials. I mean, they don't see color. In fact, they're majority minority, and you have far more rights that have been advanced in this country. This country has not deteriorated. We're having a fight over arguments that go on over the internet, for God's sakes. So we're talking about it. The public square is everywhere, and I think that's a good thing.
I just want to interject because there's one thing that happened this week with NASCAR, because NASCAR in the last 2 weeks basically banned the use of or display or any patron or fan bringing the Confederate flag. And then Bubba Wallace, who is one of the only African-American drivers, he saw what he thought was a noose in his garage at Talladega. After an FBI investigation, they found that it was a pull rope for the garage and that it wasn't actually a targeted hate crime. But some of the response has been sort of racially charged in the sense that you have Jamel Hill from The Atlantic and the Reverend Al Sharpton sort of doubling down on this race hate crime. Amber,
so don't forget, Bubba got death threat, for Pete's sake.
And Bubba got death threats.
We're not playing games here.
Don Lemon basically this week after the FBI investigation, basically saying that it was a news. But then he kind of retracted, walked it back, issued a statement saying, I'm glad it was an embarrassing time, instead of saying tripling down on it. But Amber, to you, I mean, what does this really say about how we are in this time right now? It seems like everyone, if you're willing to find something that's cancelable, you will.
I think it's a sign that there is something deeply sick in our culture that people take solace in being a victim, and that there are people who want to destroy other people's lives and not have any semblance of grace or forgiveness when that person offers an apology. And we're headed down a really awful road if people cannot recover from past mistakes in their life and prove that they've become better people. Clearly, people are missing something deep inside of them if they think that's an acceptable way to run a society.
Clarence, to you.
Yeah, I'm old enough to remember. I was finishing college when students were killed at Kent State and at Jackson State for exercising their right of free speech. I don't think we're going backwards right now. I mean, we've made a hell of a lot of progress as far as free speech goes. I mean, what are we arguing about now? People wearing blackface makeup. I mean, it's generally agreed that this is not acceptable anymore, and people need to be told so. But some people are going to go overboard. But I don't think we're going to hell in a handbasket right now. I think we're just stumbling our way toward improvement.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about obviously wearing blackface in the sense that obviously it's unacceptable, it's controversial. People have been doing it thinking that they're trying to make a grand statement about how blackface is bad, but in the end are canceling themselves as a result. It's actually kind of interesting. President Obama, I remember in the lead up, I believe in either the 2018 election, talking about the circular firing squad in the political sense. But now we're seeing it in sort of the cultural sense that, you know, Americans are just as divided as ever because, you know, you see one of the slightest slight or maybe sin, cultural sin, all of a sudden that person, they should have their life ruined.